So yeah, a bit about your upbringing, childhood. Where did you grow up? I know you got 10 siblings, or you're one of 10. Talk to me a bit about your childhood.
Yeah.
Was it an average childhood upbringing? Was you from a wealthy background, poor background? What was it like?
Well, my father was a homicide detective for the Los Angeles Police Department in the 40s and 50s. So I wouldn't call that a wealthy upbringing by any means. We had, I guess what you call an average middle class upbringing in a place called Sherman Oaks, California. And it was I just say it was just kind of an average neighborhood that I lived in, and I mean, great times though. It was fun growing up in the 50s and 60s.
Was you and your siblings always sort of athletically inclined? Was you always into sports?
Well, all of us were, yeah. All 8 boys. We all played. Out here, Little League. It's called Little League Baseball. Is huge, and it was extremely huge in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it still is for that matter. But back then, baseball kind of ruled supreme, in the United States. So, yeah, we all played baseball, youth baseball. We all, some of us played youth football, but most of us played high school baseball and football as well.
When did the boxing start?
And then lastly, I played 1 year of college football, and I had brothers that played college basketball, one brother that played college basketball, and then another brother that signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers. He was one of the top draft picks right out of high school to the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1964. My brother Greg. So, yeah, we were definitely athletically inclined, and my father was loved sports and played himself back in the day. So, yeah, it was sports kind of ruled supreme in our home with 8 boys, to say the least. And then, of course, we had 2 sisters.
What was it like growing up with so many siblings and, like you say, all into your sports as well?
Oh, I mean, we basically had our own ball club, between us. So I can honestly tell you that growing up, my brothers and I, if we weren't playing outside, we were playing inside sports, making up games and what have you. It was a great. I mean, I look back on it now and I go, wow, I really had a lot of fun. And so we basically anywhere we could, we'd get a game of some sort going. Normally, baseball, football, or basketball.
When was it that the boxing started for you?
Well, I had a brother that fought. I forgot to mention that. I had another brother that fought professionally back in the 60s. So, but my dad always had a heavy bag and gloves, and our garage looked like it was a sporting goods store. We had everything, and it was just year-round sports. So we had baseball equipment, football equipment, basketball equipment, and boxing equipment. So yeah, it was like that. It was like that.
Did you ever compete yourself in boxing?
Just a little bit. And it was because of my brother that fought professionally. Had met a guy that he was sparring with at a particular gym out here, and that sparring partner who was another professional fighter had a son who went to another school, but was the same age as I was, and through serendipity, I ended up becoming friends with him and started going to his backyard boxing gym when I was about 16, 17, and he was a year behind me, and a year or 2. But we were fast friends in high school, and that's how I started. I went to his gym, and he ended up, having, a plethora of amateur fights. He ended up fighting Sugar Ray Leonard in the Nationals in 1970. I want to say 1970. Oh God, 2 or 3. And from there, he turned pro. And I was probably with him for a couple, 3 years before he turned pro. And when he did turn pro, I ended up then started working his corners. And by 1978, he fought Wilfredo Benitez in, I want to say, August of 78. Then he fought Sugar Ray Leonard in October of 78. Then he fought Pepino Cuevas in July of 79. Then we fought Tommy Hearns in April of 81. He fought Milton McCory, the champion. Who became champion. Then he fought Johnny Bumpus, who became. So basically, he fought 6 world champions while we were working together, and probably had 65 pro fights. And his name was Randy Shields, not Ronnie Shields, but Randy Shields. And he grew up right down the street from me, basically. And that's kind of from that meeting of him early on when we were in high school, that friendship, developed into a working relationship. And I worked almost all of his pro fights. And then by the time he retired in or about 81, we started our own business, my brothers and I. And the rest is history, as they say. From that time, then we worked our way up the ladder in boxing from the early 80s. And opened our own promotional company, management company, and we put on local fights at a place called the Country Club. It wasn't a country club. It was just named the Country Club. It was a standalone site where we put on monthly shows for about a decade through the 80s. And so any talent we had that we wanted to develop and build an early record for, we did it there at the Country Club. And that's basically where we started. Micheal Nunn, who eventually went on to we signed him in 84, and he was alternate on the 84 Olympic team, and then he went on to win the world championship against his competitor and former gold medal winner, Frank Tate. So Frank Tate won the gold medal in the 88 Olympics. Nunn was on the Olympic team as his alternate. But after 4 years, they met as pros, and Frank Tate had become champion, and we challenged him in I want to say July of '88, and we ended up stopping him in maybe the 7th, 8th round at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and that was our first champion was Micheal Nunn in '88. And then, of course, the Corrales brothers, I started in '84. They turned pro, I want to say, in '89, and then they became champions in, I want to say, '94, both of them. So, by '94, we started in 81, and by '94, we had 3 world champions that we had developed right out of our own gym. And then many, many others after that.
Absolutely. The list of your fighters in a stable is almost endless. In terms of, you mentioned obviously you start a promotional company, management company between you and your brothers, and you got the gym, obviously your training side of things. Is it always the training that's been the most loved part of it for you?
For me?
Yeah.
No, I was. Look, my brother Dan started the, company. He was the brains, definitely, without a doubt. And I did the work in the gym. It was a perfect marriage, because I couldn't and didn't want to do what he did, and I think the reverse was the same for Dan. So it was perfect. I loved being in the gym, and he loved being in the office. Although he was a sportsman, a great basketball player, he was really cut out for that sort of stuff. I wasn't, and so it worked perfectly. You know, he took care of the business and made the deals and signed the fighters, and I trained them.
I just want to put some names to you. You've already mentioned one of them. I was going to mention Micheal Nunn. But when I put these names to you, just tell me a little bit about what it was like to work with them and what they were like as fighters. So we'll recap over Micheal Nunn, go a bit more in depth about Micheal. What was he like to train and what was he like as a fighter?
Who was that, James? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Micheal Nunn, first of all.
Oh, Mike Nunn was, I think, without a doubt, and I've trained a lot of guys, he was probably the greatest athlete I've ever trained. He when Mike Nunn was training correctly, when he was giving it 110% like he normally did with me, he was virtually unbeatable. I want to say we were 35-0 together, and he probably had, I want to say 26 knockouts, and defended his title several times before, you know, he decided to go in another direction, which was a bad move for all concerned, including himself. And but he was probably, without a doubt, one of the greatest athletes I ever trained. And he could fight. I mean, he could fight. He was athletic. He was tall. He was left-handed. He could take a punch. He was just unbelievable on his legs, and quick hands, combinations. Just pretty much destroyed everybody he fought with me at the top level. I mean, he beat Frank Tate. We knocked out Tate. We knocked out Juan Roldan. We knocked out Sambu Kalambe, who was just an incredible technician. Knocked him out in 88 seconds in the first round. And then by the fourth defense, coming up on that fight, was, I want to say, Marlon Starling. And after that fight, it was it's when we had our split. So yeah, we were well on our way, rolling very nicely through the middleweight division. It could have been something spectacular if Teddy stuck it out with us, but yeah, that's the way it works out.
Just on the subject of Micheal Nunn, obviously more recently he's just recently come out of prison and he's back in the ring again. What do you make of his comeback at his age now?
Well, he's 56 years old. I mean, that says everything you need to know. It's just, it's to me, I have a hard time with, you know, senior citizen boxers. I mean, justifying it, I just don't like it. I think it's dangerous. But he had, I saw his fight, and you know, the guy he was in there with, Pat, I think his name Pat Melovich or something like that. He was a former. I know he's a Hall of Fame, you know, mixed martial artist, but you know, they're both in their 50s, and it looked like it. And you know, it was a good show for the fans out there in Iowa, but you know, that would not be anything that would be considered high-end athleticism at the national level. So, you know, if he chooses to do something like that, that's his decision. I'm not for it, but you know, look, I applaud him for trying to do something he wants to do and make, you know, do something legitimate, and that's where he ended up fighting just last month, and I've got no problem with it. I wouldn't want to be involved in that.
Talk to me a little bit about Edison Miranda, known as the bogeyman of the division as such.
Edison Miranda, well, I did train Edison Miranda for a couple of fights. He was something else. What a great personality. He had really, really solid power. Man, he was a great puncher. Unfortunately, I got him a little bit later in his career. He won I want to say we had two fights. The first one he won up in Fresno. I think it was a first or second round knockout against a real tough guy with a good record. I think he was the Mexican national champion. and we stopped him in 1 or 2 rounds. It might have been the first round. And then from that, we went on to Lucien Boutet in Montreal. And unfortunately, Edison got stopped in that fight. You know, Boutet was on a roll back then. He was another 6'2" southpaw. Just at that point, he was just peaking at that point. He was really a difficult guy. And we were doing well for the first couple rounds, and then there was a little break in concentration during, I think, the 3rd round with Edison, and Boutet took advantage of that, and that was curtains for him, and that was that.
Corrales. What was he like?
Man, Diego Corrales was one of a kind. As most of these guys at the top are. They usually have something very special about them. That's why they get there. And Diego, you know, I had gone up against Diego. It was probably in my long career in 2000, by the time we fought Diego in, oh God, what was it? Let's see, 2005, going backwards 2.5 years, 3 years, maybe 2002, when Casamayor fought, and I was working with Joel Casamayor, former gold medal winner, of course, and became champion with me. We stopped Diego in the fight. But I got to tell you, it was really, I would say maybe one of the best camps, one of the top 5 I had ever had going into a fight, and that was with Casamayor. I was so concerned about Diego's brilliance that I really went, you know, to the ends of the earth to cover every base that we could, and I tried to develop a game plan that was, if they were looking at our style from their perspective and developing a game plan, I wanted to develop a game plan that was totally different than anything they had seen Casamayor do before. And so that's kind of, I mean, we really went all the way in camp and in strategy. So preparation and strategy was really one of the best, I think, that because I was so challenged by Diego's greatness in going up against him, I really was concerned to cover all of my bases. And I think in that was one of the great camps I ever had with Casamayor, and we were able to stop Corrales. It was on the undercard of the James Toney Holyfield fight. So we stopped him that night, and then they made an immediate rematch, and through a twist of fate and business-wise and, you know, crazy things that happen in boxing, I ended up in the immediate rematch with Diego against my guy of 6 years that I had been training, Casamayor. And, of course, the same kind of concern I had facing Diego, I now had a very legitimate concern facing the guy I had trained for 6 years. He was quite something, and a difficult guy to fight and beat. But we managed. We put our heads together, and Diego put, you know, the work in the gym, and we developed a strategy, and we took back the 130-pound title from Casamayor in the immediate rematch. So I was with one guy one night and the other guy the other night, and thankfully my corner came up the winner both times. So, and then of course that win over Casamayor, we moved up after we won the title at 130, and then our second fight together was against the 135-pound champion, Acelino Freitas, who was, I want to say he was 35-0 with 34 knockouts, which is quite an impressive record, I might say. And we developed a strategy for him. By this time now, this is our second training camp, and we were very close, very close. We bonded very well, and he shared a lot of time at my home, my family. And then we went on to fight Freitas, and we stopped him in 10. Very difficult fight. It was not easy getting to Freitas. He was a very elusive target, and he could get in and out very quickly and managed to hit you while he was doing it. And so we eventually caught up to him in the 10th round, and we stopped him. He got knocked down, I want to say twice that round, and then walked away from the referee, and that was waved off. And then that fight, winning that 30 fight, then put us in a position to kind of unify things with Jose Luis Castillo in that epic battle they had.
Absolutely. I was going to say, another good round 10 as well.
Yeah, but getting to that 10th round in all cases, whether it be Casamayor, Freitas, or Castillo, they were all very tough roads to get there. It was a battle of attrition with all three of them. It was not easy, but Diego was such a determined warrior, and he had the skills and the means. And luckily, my training coincided and really blended well with what he did naturally and what he had learned formally. And we put our collective minds together and then applied it in the gym and strategized. It was a good matchup between us. And that was one of the great fights of all time. People still talk about it to this day. It's been 15 years, but yeah, what a warrior. He was one of the he just had such quick hands, and he could punch in combinations, and he could hurt you with either hand, and he was feared by his opponents, and he was big for the division, and he had so many things going for him. It was just, I'll tell you, it was just a disaster. The whole way it ended with Diego. It was very surreal, very heartbreaking. Many adjectives you could use to describe it for me and his family and friends and fans.
Absolutely. Just want to go back and touch on that Castillo round 10. I had to watch it again today, in fact. Obviously, Corrales was dropped twice in that round. He had a point deducted for spitting out the gum shields. In that round, it almost looked like there was no going back for him. It looked like he was losing the fight. As a trainer role, what was you saying to him? What did you have to do to bring him around to get that stoppage in?
Well, maybe during the 10th round, he, because of the scoring, because of the point deducted, two knockdowns, he may have been. I'm not sure what the scoring was after 9. Yeah, I'm not sure if we were ahead. I forget if we were ahead, or it was even, or if we were down. But to me, we were ahead. Even if the scorecards were not what I'm saying, but it felt like we were ahead after 9. Okay. But it was a close fight all the way. I won't doubt that. All the way. I think we had a good first 4 rounds, especially. So I think we banked some early rounds, which was actually my strategy to do that, to go out there and kind of submarine them and go in the pocket and work on the inside, which they probably figured we were going to box because of our height and reach, but that just wasn't in Diego's makeup, and I knew it. So I knew Diego could fight on the inside, and they were probably expecting that we were not going to fight on the inside. I figured we might have the element of surprise early on, bank some rounds and bang them up a little bit. And I think that worked, because had we not done that and softened them up a little bit early, I think it would have been difficult to knock out Castillo in 10. He had never been knocked out before.
He's never been dropped.
Pardon?
He's never been dropped from the canvas before at all.
Exactly. So knowing that, I knew we had to soften him up early, or else it was, he was going to be fresh down the road. And he was fresh. He was able to put Diego down twice in the 10th, but exerting that energy to put Diego down and try to finish him also can drain, your energy bank. And I think Castillo was, had used a considerable amount of time and energy trying to knock out Diego in that 10th round. And the fact is, I refer back to our conditioning. It was, it was an incredible camp with Diego for that fight. And he was still, even after getting dropped twice in that 10th round, which would normally kind of, take all the energy out of the guy getting dropped, as well as it takes energy to try to knock the guy out. He recovered so well, and then it turns out, because he worked so hard in that camp, that our punching power was still evident, even in the 10th round. And that's, I think, because of the conditioning, and the fact that it was a rugged fight for both guys. That again, when you have an equally talented competitor across from you, it boils down to who is in better shape at the end of the day. And even though we got dropped twice, we were in better shape. We were able to get up and then turn the screws on Castillo, and surprising him. I'm sure he was going, "What the hell?" I thought I had this guy out, and now he's punching harder than ever. And he was, Diego. He came back to the corner. Of course, I had my last, on the second knockdown, when I put the mouthpiece back in, I had one last chance to, of encouragement to pass to him. And he was clear-eyed. He was arguing with the referee about taking a point away from him. So those were the things that were encouraging to me as I looked at Diego. If you look at body language and somebody, getting up from a knockdown, there's all sorts of looks you can see. And the look that I saw was it was positive for me, because he got up strong. He went down. It looked like it was a type of knockdowns you aren't going to get up from. But when he did get up, he was strong. He was arguing with the referee. Those were all good signs to me that I could make some determinations where we were, where he was physically and mentally at that point. So when he did come back to the corner to get his mouthpiece, I felt comfortable not telling him to hold, and I felt comfortable not telling him to run, but I felt comfortable telling him to go back in there and take care of business. So, you have choices to what to say to a guy when they get knocked down, depending on, how hurt you think they are. But the signs were all pointing to encourage him to get back in there now and turn the tables on Castillo, and that's exactly what he did. So I'm glad I gave him those instructions, and I'm even more happy that he was able to follow them and then just pull out one of the great turnaround upsets, that you'll be, that you could ever see. And that's what he did. He was an amazing warrior. He was good. He was so good. I've trained a lot of guys, James. Let me tell you, this guy was something else. He had an intestinal fortitude. He had a desire to win. He didn't care how rough it got. He thrived on that, to tell you the truth. He was a very, outside the ring, maybe one of the greatest, sweetest guys you'll ever meet. Seriously. He was just so much fun and so soft-spoken and intelligent. But inside that ring, when he flipped that switch, ooh, man, he was just the epitome of what I really liked in a fighter. So I can't express how much I appreciated Diego Corrales as a friend, as a fighter, and as a warrior champion. Yeah, it was just amazing.
Just finally on that fight in particular, the referee, Tony Weeks, I believe it was, obviously in that 10th round, obviously Diego was dropped twice, he had a point deduction. How well do you think the referee handled that round in particular, but the fight as well?
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Tony Weeks was the man of his time. I could not see anybody else as great as the referees that are out there then and now. There are a lot of great guys out there. And I have to tell you, I think he was just, it was destiny that Tony Weeks was in the ring that night, because he really handled it like a pro. And if not for him, we may have been deprived of that legendary comeback. And he let the fighters fight. There was very little clinching. There were a few punches straight low, but both fighters, were respectful of that, and nobody was intentionally trying to do anything like that. But, they're great body punchers, and, sometimes those punches are going to go, a little bit below the belt. And, nobody got hit squarely low, purposely. So, Tony Weeks, would reprimand when appropriate, but he stayed out of the fight because he knew he knew the two guys, he knew the two principals in the ring, and he knew how they fought. And Tony Weeks had he was a veteran even at that point, and man, I just say anybody else that night in there reffing that fight, it could have turned out differently. So I've always given Tony Weeks a lot of credit for how he handled that fight by not interfering in it too often. Only really when it was totally necessary for him to do it did he. And that's why it was so great. And he didn't panic. See, I think Tony judged Diego's condition very quickly and very accurately in the 10th round, which is something that the great referees can do. They can size up, just like I sized up Diego's condition from my vantage point in the corner. I was very encouraged by his body language and otherwise. And Tony Weeks, I think, observed the same thing, and is why he let that fight go on. By Diego's physical response and his verbal response to Tony Weeks. And he didn't panic, and he allowed the fight to go on. He knew it was a nip and tuck fight, and that we're almost close to the end of the fight, and he just made all the right decisions, thankfully. But I cannot give him enough credit, because I think that was a real pressure cooker situation for any referee, and that was a 5-star performance by Tony Weeks.
Fantastic. Joe, that is everything I wanted to ask you. I really, really appreciate your time today, and I hope you have all the best with the guys coming up as well with their fights.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you asked pertinent and interesting questions, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.